Just want to issue a content warning for this episode. This episode discusses in-depth and detail loss and pregnancy loss and miscarriage. So if those topics are uncomfortable for you, please consider skipping this episode. But we felt they were extremely important to cover as part of our Women's Health series. Enjoy the episode. All right, welcome back to another episode of Diabetics Doing Things. This is the final installment of our Women's Health series for National Diabetes Awareness Month 2023. And I think one of the best parts of this is that we get to check in with our friends from the diabetes online community and share a little bit more of a patient perspective. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eritrea to introduce our returning guest from Lebanon, Cyrine. Welcome back to the show.
Hello, I'm so happy to be back.
I'm so excited to have you. Cyrine is not only a dear friend of mine, but also just a repeat guest, like Rob said, a true friend of the pod. She was on the show in 2021, actually during the Beirut blast, like right after, and was the first takeover person for me from Diabetics Doing Things, one of my first big projects and initiatives. And we wanted to bring her back for a Women's Health series as a special final episode. Today's episode is a little bit different. Not just because she's been on the show before, but because a lot of what we're going to talk about has to do with not just her story, but also part of mine. So, Cyrine, welcome. I'm so happy to have you.
I'm so happy to be here, and I hope my story helps other people go through their stories, because it's a very common story, unfortunately.
I think that's a really good way to open this up. Usually on these episodes, we start with interviewing our guest. And today, I think that it's just necessary to provide some context for our listeners so that they can understand where my friendship with Cyrine really began. Because honestly, how does a girl in Dallas, Texas meet a girl from Beirut, Lebanon and become not just best friends, but almost like sisters? I want to cry. Too many times in society, like Cyrine said, it feels like we only acknowledge successful pregnancies. And in the background, women are losing babies every single day. While successful pregnancies with diabetes are absolutely possible and such a big part of the world now, it's so important to remember that diabetes can pose a huge increased risk. So for me personally, in 2021, I found Cyrine's account while I was looking for people to take over Diabetics Doing Things. And after starting kind of a quick friendship, just a small DM relationship, I saw a story where Cyrine spoke about how she lost her baby, Joya. I, Eritrea, ended up joining Positive on Glucose, which is Cyrine's support online group, and started attending weekly meetings and chats with other people in the Middle East who were going through similar experiences, not just with pregnancy loss, but just all of the stigma that comes with being a person living with diabetes while still living in an Islamic and Arabic culture. At the time, and this is not something we've talked about on the pod before, but that I'm finally brave enough to open up about, I'd experienced my own loss in April of 2019. I was pregnant for about 4 months, and I had hyperemesis gravidarium through the entire 4 months. What that means is that I had all day morning sickness. So that is being sick, throwing up, and that can create complications when you're a person with diabetes because you are taking insulin for your food. So with those episodes of vomiting came intense hypoglycemia that was followed by seizures and accompanied more symptoms that were just complicated and more complicated. Ultimately, in my story, I ended up losing about 28 to 30 pounds and deciding to move forward with terminating my pregnancy, which I spoke with my family about, and thankfully religious leaders who said that in Islam, this is allowed because the health of the woman comes first. So I felt spiritually okay, but still just lost and alone because I had no one to talk to. So there was so much shame and guilt around what happened and the decision that I'd had to make that when I stumbled on Positive on Glucose, because that's what happened, a whole community of women who were experienced and living similar experiences jumped out to save me, to pull me from drowning. Cyrine and Noor and Yasmin and Julie and Taj and Dr. Kadira and Iman, whose mom is an OBGYN in Egypt. A whole group of women who were culturally and sometimes religiously similar to me. For me, talking about what happened felt like it was finally like breathing, like taking a breath of fresh air and getting to tell a story. There's a quote, Maya Angelou says that there is no greater pain than a story that goes untold. And for me, Cyrine's group gave me a space to do that. there's an importance to loss that demands discussion, exploration, and that's the space that Cyrine and Positive on Glucose gave me. And it's the space that I want to create today for any woman who might be listening to this episode. So now that I've told my story, Cyrine, I want to give you the stage to maybe tell us about your experience in being pregnant and that loss that did lead to the loss of Joya.
I feel so emotional, like, So this is a story of, like, I like to call it loss and love, because, like, for me, it was losing something, but finding love in a sense. So in 2019, I had an unplanned pregnancy. I just had gotten like married. I was 6 months into my marriage. I was doing my master's. I had a full-time job. Life was like chaotic, and I found out I was pregnant, and I was not ready to be pregnant, like emotionally, mentally, like, pregnancy is a big deal. And in the Middle East, a woman living with diabetes is a big deal because, like, we live all our lives being conditioned that we're not fit to be moms, our bodies cannot carry babies, we're shamed, people doubt our ability to be moms, which is so natural to a woman. And I have to say, like, throughout my entire pregnancy, basically, I had an unplanned pregnancy, and I just had gotten married like 6 months into marriage, a full-time job, doing my master's. Life was it was chaotic, and like pregnancy was the last thing like that I needed, honestly, in my life, and I was not prepared mentally, emotionally. My HbA1c was 8.5, so like I wasn't doing my best, even diabetes wise, and it shook me. So I remember like I tried everything I can to lower my HbA1c. I tried to eat as healthy as I can, to be on top of things all the time. But like needless to say, like where I come from in the Middle East, in Lebanon, we lack a lot on education. So basically, a woman with diabetes is someone who is unfit to carry a baby. Like we live with this programming or conditioning that we are unfit to be mothers, that our bodies failed us in a sense. And so like this always was in the back of my mind, like I have to do this, I have to do a good job. And especially back then, like I had just started Positive on Glucose, I think the same month I got pregnant. And like there was this internet community that supported me and that was waiting for me to have this baby. And like I had this community in Lebanon, and I just wanted to prove, like to give them hope, like yes, I can do it, like our bodies can do that. So I remember the gender reveal and like knowing it was a girl, and I was like so happy because like I felt back then that I would be a girl mom. Now I'm totally a boy mom, by the way. So we called her Joya. We wanted like a name that is different, and we wanted something on the basis of joy. So like Joya. So that is where the name came from. And I loved her so much. Like it's so weird, but I felt very connected to her. I would know like what time it is depending on when she moved. Like I would definitely know like now it's 10 a.m., now it's 2 a.m., 2 p.m., whatever. And I felt very connected to her. We went on adventures. We celebrated her while she was just in my tummy. And I think I started having weird symptoms when I was around 6 months pregnant. I started swelling. I would Google, like my symptoms, and like the number one complication with diabetes, type 1 diabetes, always was preeclampsia. And I asked like my gynecologist back then, who was married to my endocrinologist. Like I did not pick them one team, I picked them one home, literally, because like I wanted them to take good care of me. And like my endocrinologist, I'd worked with him for 4 years. I trusted him. I loved the guy. He was so amazing. And like, of course, his wife would take perfect care of me. And like, they're at the same clinic. They're married. They literally sit around the kitchen table every day. So like, they're a good team. And she said like, nah, you're fine. It happens to any pregnant lady. Like, she never tested me out. And I kept having persisting symptoms, and like, they just kept getting worse and worse. And every time I would Google them, it would say preeclampsia, and I always go back to preeclampsia. And I remember one time, I was like 8 months something pregnant. I was like, hey, like, might I have preeclampsia? She was like, no, like, stop Googling things, stop reading. You're so obsessed. She told my husband, like, stop listening to her. She told my mom, like, stop listening to her. She's so obsessed. She needs to stop Googling things. She's fine. Like, this happens to all pregnant ladies. And she never tested me. Like, deep down in my heart, I knew like something was off. And I always, like, I don't know if I've ever told you this, Eritrea. I always had these dreams when I was pregnant that I would give birth and I would ask them, like, is the baby okay? Does the baby have 10 toes and 10 fingers? And they would say yes. And I would ask them in my dream, like, why isn't the baby crying? I always had like this recurring dream in my, like, during my pregnancy, which was weird. And then I understood why. Until New Year's Eve, 2019, meaning like the next day would be 1/1/2020. I woke up and the baby was not moving. And like my baby had a schedule, like she would move at a schedule and she was not moving. And I Googled, they told me like, eat chocolate, turn to your, I think, either right or left side, I don't remember anymore. Like the baby is supposed to move and she was not moving. 3 hours passed by, she was not moving. And deep down inside of me, I knew. Like I knew. So I called my husband, he's like, no, you're overreacting, the baby's okay, call your OBGYN, she's fine. I called my OBGYN, she's like, no, you're overreacting. I was like, no, something is off. I can feel it. I'm a mom, I'm connected to this child, and I feel something's off. So she said, no, I'm sure everything's fine, like just rest a bit, I'm sure she's gonna move. I wait half an hour, she doesn't move, and like, khalas, inside of my heart, I know that she's not there. So I call my OBGYN again, I'm like, my baby's not there, I'm certain, like, I need to go do something. She's like, well, yeah, you're overreacting, but if you want, just go to the ER, tell them, like, to do, I forgot what you call them, like,
The ultrasound?
monitoring.
Yeah.
No, not an ultrasound, like, it's kind of monitoring where they like, see the heartbeat of the baby.
Oh,
So I
that
call my
belt
husband,
thing,
like,
the belt thing that they
yes,
put on you
the belt
people.
thing.
Yes.
I forgot what it's called. So, like, I call my husband, he's like, yeah, like, just go, take the cargo. I'm like, no, you're taking me. He's like, I'm sure you're fine. I'm like, no, you're taking me. So I remember I went around my house, I tidied up my house, I wore a black dress, I got my carry-on, and I just knew that I was going to the hospital. I'm staying there, like my baby's not there anymore. And like I remember all the way to the hospital, I literally ripped off all my nail polish because I was so anxious. And I went into the elevator in the hospital, and this guy looks at me and like, I'm a whale, I'm so pregnant. He's like, oh, you're gonna have a baby on New Year's Eve, that's so cute. And deep inside, I'm like, no, that's not gonna happen. So I go inside the delivery ward where they do this monitoring. I walk inside, and I lay on this bed, and they're like, yeah, now we're gonna see the heartbeat of the baby. And it's one nurse, then it's two nurses, then it's three, then it's four. Then telling me to like undress, take your jewelry off. They tell my husband like go down to admissions, admit your wife, and like my poor husband thought I was having a baby, and deep down inside I knew like nope. So like I tell them what's going on, is there a heartbeat? They don't answer. I ask them again, is there a heartbeat? They don't answer. So like they start leaving one after the other, and then like there's just this one nurse, and I'm like, did my baby die? And she's like, the OBGYN will now come and let you know what happened. And that moment, I literally had an out-of-body experience. Like I could see myself from the corner of the room, crying, my eyeballs out. Like I can never forget the feeling. It felt like the entire space on Earth did not fit the emotions that I had. Like no space on the planet could fit what I felt. It's such a weird feeling. And like my husband comes in and he sees me and he realizes. Like we didn't have to talk. Like he realizes. And I remember he brought me back. He said, you're still here. You're still here. You're alive. You're still here. she's gone, but you're still here. And like he repeats it like 6, 7 times, and he grounds me, and I come back. I come back into my physical body. Like I feel like I'm still here. And then I had to do like a very tough decision, which is who to call, because like it's New Year's Eve. Like I remember like I was doing some pizza, like my parents and my husband's parents are like getting ready to celebrate. Everyone's coming from like all towns, like all his brothers, all the family is coming together. Like what the hell am I gonna do? So we decided that we don't want to tell his parents because we didn't want to spoil New Year's Eve for them. It was such a weird, like I don't know how, we were so like zen. It was so weird. But I call my parents, I tell them, like, I call my mom, I'm like, listen, I lost my baby. I'm at the hospital. Can you please come? She's like, what? I'm like, I lost my baby. Can you come to the hospital? And she just couldn't, like. So the gynecologist comes. She's like, I'm sorry for your loss. If you want, you can go celebrate New Year's Eve and come back in 2 days and we deliver you. I'm like, what the hell? Like, no, get this baby out of me right now. So she tries to convince my husband that I should have a normal birth, like not a C-section. And like my entire thoughts were like, get this dead baby out of my body. Like I can't like even accept the idea that there's a dead baby. It's like get her out. Just get her out. And she convinces him and he convinces me that this is the best thing, the best course of action, whatever. And all of this happened and they still did not even tell me I have preeclampsia. You know what the first thing she told me was? You're diabetic. This is a complication most diabetics have. You had stillbirth. This happens to most of people with type 1. And I felt like I was slapped in the face. Like, don't you dare blame my diabetes. Like, I worked so hard to be at home for this baby. Don't you dare blame my diabetes. Like, I knew that was not what happened. So I stay over. The next morning, they induce me. I start throwing up nonstop. Hypertension at 17, and then they decide that I should have an emergency C-section. I never see my baby. I never saw her. I never held her. I never got to say goodbye to her. And to this moment, like, I'm still in therapy because of that. You know, like, I didn't have closure. I didn't get to see her. I don't know how she looks like. And she's part of me, you know, like, she's part of my soul. I never got to see how she looks like. And like the following 4 days at the hospital, I was just so numb. Like people would come and say, I'm so sorry for your loss. And they cry. I'm like, oh, it's okay. I'm okay. And I don't know where that calmness came from. But like one thing I remember the most was the love. Like I felt, and I feel it up till this moment, like she filled me with so much love. Like she taught me how to, I don't know love without her. Like, and that was why she chose me to be her mom, even if it was like just for 9 months or 8.5 months. Like she taught me how to love. And ever since then, I felt like I have this fire to give back, to love, you know, to give love. A week after it happened, I decided to see another OBGYN to try to figure out what happened. I gave him my tests, and he looked at my tests. He's like, oh, you have pre plus protein in your urine. You had preeclampsia. And I was so angry. Like all of this could have been avoided. Like, I was so angry. But at the same time, I felt like if God chose me to go through this, like, he knew that I was up for it. And I was. And I used this story to empower and help and to kind of become an advocate and to speak up more about diabetes and to speak up more about women empowerment and speak up more about mental health. And I was blessed this year with Fadil. Weirdly enough, I got pregnant with Fadil, who was also unplanned, the same time I was with Joya. And his due date was also in the same week Joya's due date was. It felt like God was giving me another chance. Like literally, he got me to go through the exact same dates with hope. And I had my baby boy. I still had complications, but this time I was prepared. Like I knew I would have preeclampsia, so like I did all the tests and I was prepared. And even when I went into the ICU, 8 months pregnant, I went through DKA, by the way. Even though like I did not have high blood glucose, but like I had DKA and then I had preeclampsia, so like I was
so
prepared.
was that like I'm sorry to interrupt. Was that euglycemic DKA?
Yeah.
Yeah, when your blood
Yeah.
sugars are normal, but you're still going to decay. Yeah.
Yeah. And like spent like 6 days in the ICU. When I gave birth, I was separated from my baby for the first 48 hours. I didn't see him. He spent 10 days in the NICU. But still, I was prepared. I had a medical team that believed me. And I told them, like, this is my story. And you do my way. Like, you do things my way. Because, like, I know. And this is where advocacy is so important because I know I live with diabetes. It's my diabetes. My diabetes is different than yours, Robin, different than yours, Eritrea. And like no one can judge diabetes other than the person who's living with it. And so like I forced them to believe me and to listen to me. And I've advocated for myself and I have a healthy baby right now. So that's the story of loss and love.
I want to thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that story because I think obviously there's so much pain behind it and and so much grief and loss, but we do feel that love coming through. I also think, even for Eritrea, if you hadn't gone through that and started, you said you started positive on glucose right at the same time. And then as that's, as this is happening to you, you're able to share that and create a space for people to find you and connect with you in the future. And I know that Eritrea is not the only or the last person to do that. And so, it's interesting that we were talking about, God doesn't give you challenges that you can't overcome or that you can't handle. And it doesn't negate how difficult they can be. But I think and Eritrea and I have been talking about this, that diabetes sometimes forces you to have a growth mindset. And, you can take this horrible, tragic, negative thing and turn it into positivity, positive on glucose, and meet other people and become, internet sisters in many ways, and, diabetes sisters in many ways. And so, I think that to me is the sort of crown jewel of what internet and self-advocacy can lead to, is connecting to other people and helping them learn from you. Like you said, everybody's diabetes is so different. And also all of the different other chronic illnesses that spiral from diabetes that we all deal with in different ways, may not be the same from one person to the other. But when you have your experience and you're able to advocate for yourself, sometimes on the other side of that courage is something that you want. And so, it's so encouraging to hear you today as a boy mom and with Fadel, I think that's a really amazing story to come back to and to say that, because I learned and because I trained myself to advocate for myself and connected with other people and helped other people. Now my on the other side of that terrible pain is this beautiful joy. So I know Eritrea has a couple of questions, like, revolving around, when you were going through your second pregnancy, like what were some of the things that you really made sure to advocate for? And, hearing from your, all of the different people. I think one of the things that's really common in this podcast, especially for women with diabetes who are intuitively feeling that something is wrong with them, whether that's, in Felissa DeRosa's case, who was on our podcast a few months ago, talking about wanting to be tested for antibodies for type 1, even though her doctors thought she was type 2. And the many people who said that, no, she was overreacting, that no, that wasn't correct. Or the many people who in your life who were saying, no, everything's going to be fine. You're just overreacting. But your intuition and yourself and your body was telling you that there was something wrong. And so I think, there are people out there who mean well and still will not know everything that you will know about your body. And so, back to the advocacy piece, it can be really hard to advocate for yourself, especially when experts and people who care about you are telling you that you're overreacting, but you have to listen to your gut. You got to really follow and only you know yourself that well. So anyway, I'll turn it back to Eritrea because I know we have some important questions.
Well, before we get to them, I guess something I'm working on is leaning into the jazz, as my mentor Rob has been teaching me. And I think you're a really good storyteller. And I also think you've had to tell this story many times because you are such an advocate for what's happened. And first of all, I'm always just so proud of you because you tell it so eloquently and in a way that is graceful and still just beautiful. But I always wonder, like, this is the first time that I'm ever telling my story publicly ever in a place. I want the listeners to know, Rob does not know this story. This is not a story Rob has heard before, and we're close friends. What was the moment that you were like, this is a story I need to tell? Like, was there a light bulb that turned on? What moved you to do that?
So when it first happened, I wanted like the earth to just open up and swallow me, and especially in front of the diabetes community, because everyone was waiting for me to talk about like my pregnancy and my baby. And back then I had so many internet friends, like from Plasma Glucose, you'd connect over Instagram. You're one of them, Muhammad's one of them. I had so many friends back then on Instagram. And this was even before the WhatsApp group and the support group over Zoom. So like we're talking 4 or 5 months before like that even started. And I was so silent up until February. And then I was like, I need to talk about this. Like, I literally need to talk about what happened because so many people are waiting to hear it from me. Like, people would text me asking me, like, how are you doing? When's the baby due? And I would just not answer them for weeks. And I remember I set up the tripod in the baby's room, and I put the camera, and I put a chair, and I was like, okay, how am I going to tell this story? And I would try to tell the story, and I would cry. And then I would wipe my tears, turn on the camera again, and try to, and like, the video was still there, even though I was not a hijabi back then. I left it. God understands, because like it would help people go through their stories. So that was the first time I ever opened up about it. And ever since then, I think the first year after it happened, the story was my fire. Like, it was my fuel. It was like the pain. I don't know, it was pain and love at the same time. I don't know how to explain it. Like, I wasn't grieving in the sense that I just wanted to be left alone. No, I was out. I was fierce. I wanted to talk about it to people. I started a baby loss group in Lebanon. I met with other moms that went through baby loss. We started doing support groups. I'm a life coach, so we started doing support groups for other moms. And I just worked so hard at supporting baby loss for the first year and a half. And then I realized that what I was really doing was like I was being overactive to just stop myself from feeling. And so in 2022, I decided to feel. I started to let myself like go. Like, I wanted to go into my grief, go into my pain, try to look at it, try to feel it, try to immerse in it. And that's when I kind of stopped telling my story for a while, until I got pregnant again.
That was going to be my next question, actually, before you just give all the spoilers away for our audience. But for me personally, I don't know if I'll ever be willing to do it again. I don't know if I'll ever be able to open myself and my heart open to an experience where I tried to bring a life onto the earth, because I think it's a brave thing to do. I think it's literal carnage, as I said before on this podcast, and I'm scared. So I always ask myself, like, Cyrine, you're the bravest woman I know, like, to just be like, you know what? I'm back on the trampoline. Here I go on this horse. Like, how did you come to that decision? Or was it just something that happened, by the will of, of the universe? So how did you get there to be like, okay, I can try one more time, or where are you there? Yeah.
So I think now I'm there, but like when it happened, I was not there. I tried for the longest time to be prepared for the idea to be pregnant again. And I would I went to therapy. Like, I changed so many therapists. I did so many mindfulness stuff, like access consciousness and like Reiki and like all the things and like the spiritual things and like the super Islamic things. Like, I did literally everything off the spectrum. And at one point I was doing great, and then I slipped again into my depression, and like my A1C was 10 point something, and I had a tumor. Actually, it was a benign tumor, but I had a really, really big tumor in my abdominal muscles, and I had to have like this big surgery. And so I go in, I do the surgery. Weirdly enough, before I did the surgery, they wanted to do an X-ray, and they were like, "Are you pregnant, ma'am?" I'm like, "No, but like if I'm pregnant, like what should we do?" They're like, "Oh, you have to wear this protective thing." I'm like, "No, let's wear it." I had no idea I was pregnant. I was pregnant, spoiler alert. I do this surgery, general anesthesia, like this really big surgery, hurts as hell. And I come out into the recovery room, and because I was still like, in and out. And like this nurse tells me like, oh, we have to do like an x-ray to the guy next to you. Are you pregnant? I'm like, no, but like, how can you protect me? Like, he's like, how we do this thing? I'm like, okay.
Yalla.
I swear to God. And like, I get out of the hospital I did the surgery on a Thursday. I come out of the hospital on a Saturday. I can barely walk, and I miss my period on a Tuesday. I'm someone who's very regular. Sorry for the information. And like, I call my diabetes educator. I'm like, oh, like my glucose like is so high all the time. It's like 400. It's not getting down. I miss my period. What's happening? It's like, might you be pregnant? I'm like, no, of course not. Like I'm on, like we're trying to keep it safe. She's like, why don't you just get a test? And I text my husband. I'm like, can you please get me a pregnancy test? He's like, why? Like, you just had general surgery and like, you're not pregnant. I'm like, get a test. And I remember I did the test. It was like 7 a.m. My husband was in the bathroom, and God knows what husbands do in the bathroom for an hour each morning. And like, and the test is positive. And I'm like, I'm barely able to walk. And like, I open the bathroom door. I'm like, oh, man, I'm pregnant. Look. And I start crying because like, I was terrified. Like, I had 2 x-rays, general anesthesia. My A1C is 10. Like, what the hell am I doing to myself? How am I pregnant? Like, how is this ever even happening? And I cried for like an hour, and then I was like, wait, I'm pregnant. It happened. I'm so happy. And I felt this calmness inside of me. And I knew my baby had a guardian angel, who's his sister. And I just knew everything was going to be okay. My A1C was down to 6 in a month. I had an overall okay pregnancy. It wasn't that hard, minus the complications that happened before I gave birth. But like now when I think of it, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I would do it again in the blink of an eye. Like now, like, literally like an hour ago, I was telling my husband, like, oh, I was putting away the baby stuff, and there are like so many baby clothes that are like they're still in very good condition. Like if he has a sister, like they fit both genders, and like I would do it in a blink of an eye, because Eritrea, society tells us that we fail as women because we have diabetes. But once you see that baby who's like this big, and you look at it and like you say, I created that, like that literally sat inside of me. And I did that. And then it's like the best achievement you've ever done in all of your life. So to all the women like who are terrified of having babies, don't. Like your body can make miracles. It's here. Like it's all here. It's what we're conditioned to believe. And it's what you decide that you want to change inside your head. You can do miracles. And like I have proof he's like asleep inside. He's proof that my body can make miracles, and that my body did not fail me at any point.
I think the way you explain it is so well. There's a belief in Islam, and I don't want to be too religious on this episode, because for our listeners, not everything here is that way. But there's a belief in Islam that what's happening to you is already written for you. That your story is your story. It was created before, obviously you have free will, but your story was already written for you. So when I hear your story and I hear about Joya, which in Spanish means jewel, and I hear about Faddal, because Habibi Faddal, I love him. I just think about how powerful the story that you have is, and how it's one that is now trailblazed a space for more women who exist like me in this weird limbo space of, do I go this way or do I go that way? And I feel like you are living proof that whichever way I decide to go, there's going to be beauty there, because through pain you can find beauty. And I feel very lucky to have you in my life and to be able to share your experience with more people here today. We do have a few more questions. I just want to kind of highlight the loss of Joya. Like you said, it was avoidable. And I think that you are a much bigger person than I am, because I am an angry person, and I don't know how I would have handled that. And I'm sure you did have anger, because we talked about it. But was there anything there in that experience that you really wish that your doctor would have done other than dismiss you? Because it sounds like she was very just dismissive in general, and not just dismissive of you, but telling other people to dismiss you. Like, I want to hop on a flight to Lebanon and fight her. But anyways, how did you like handle that? And what else do you wish that she would have done differently?
You know, like one question I'm always asked when I tell my story is like, how did you not beat the hell out of her?
Yeah, literally.
Why didn't you sue her? So like, I didn't beat the hell out of her because I'm not that kind of person. I'm like, my husband and I, we're not that kind of people, no. I believe that God will take, or like, will revenge me, like, or karma will do whatever it wants. Why I didn't sue her? Because I live in Lebanon, which is a very effed up country with a lot of failed systems, including the healthcare and the judiciary system. So even if I had sued her, I would have paid a lot of money, and she would have known someone at some political party that would have gotten her out of it. The proof is another lady lost her baby because of her, and she's still in practice. So yeah, so like for me, like I know God will take vengeance over what she did to me. I really believe in that. And I've always seen people who like cross me, like I see them with my own eyes. I see what karma does to them. So like I really, really, really believe in that. I'm waiting.
The universe balances the scales, basically. Yes.
Yes. And I wouldn't have changed anything because I'm a coach. I have learned that you have no power over others. You only have power over yourself. So I would have acted differently, and that is what I did in my second pregnancy. I don't believe in the what ifs, honestly. Like what happened happened. Nothing I can ever do will change what happened. What I can do is I can talk about my feelings, I can process them, and I could learn from them to prevent them from happening to other people or to myself again. So with my second baby, Fadl, I did everything I can to not repeat my mistakes. And actually, I changed gynecologists with Fadl. I changed gynecologists when I was 6 months pregnant because I felt like the first one wasn't taking my preeclampsia from the first pregnancy serious enough. And I did that. So we don't have power over others. We only have power over ourselves, how we feel, how we behave. And I think this is very important to realize.
That's powerful. Self-advocacy is I feel like a very common thread here. Diabetics doing things. It's like closed mouths don't get fed on this boulevard. You got to open up and speak up.
I think the reason that it keeps coming up, though, is because it's not something that's ever completed. Doesn't matter what level of diabetes or what tasks you've completed previously, you're going to still have to advocate for yourself just like it was the first time. And it takes courage to do what you said, like at 6 months in your pregnancy, to change your endocrinologist. That is probably not recommended in many cases. So you have to go against what is practical and when you're advocating for what you need.
Yeah.
Lots to say here. I'm not a man, but Rob is. I just wonder that if from a partner, and Amar's great, by the way, big fans of Amr. Shout out to my homie. But because that's my homie, he follows me and everything, be liking the post. That's my homie. But as a partner for two women, like, is there something that you would say to men who are experiencing their wives, either their wives with diabetes or themselves with diabetes, going through pregnancy loss or going through loss of a child, like as partners? Because I know for me, my partner at the time, unfortunately, was just very emotionally unavailable, and that was very, very difficult. So I wonder, what's the advice or what's something that you would want them to know to better support their partner who might have lost the physical child itself?
Yeah. So I'll tell you things that I've learned from my experience, and something also that came up in a recent conversation with Julie. You know her.
I love her.
Yeah. So basically, I think first thing, if your wife goes through loss, push her to go into therapy, because I resisted therapy for the first year and a half. And I will also advise the couple to go into a couple of couple therapy sessions. Because whether you realize it or not, it has a toll on your relationship, and there is blame and there is guilt. Whether you are vocal about it, you acknowledge that you feel it or not, it is there. And Amir and I, like, we pushed it away for so long until it blew up in our faces and we had to go to, like, process it individually and together. And I'm lucky enough to have a supportive husband in the Middle East who is pro-therapy, because, like, a lot of people here don't really believe in the concept of therapy or mental health, or like, you're not crazy. Why would you want to go? Why would you want to go to a therapist, habibti? You know, like the Arab.
يعني انت مجنونة.
Yeah, like, is she crazy? Why would she want to go to someone and blah 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 about her life? Just go pray, habibti. No, it doesn't work like that, honey. No, prayer doesn't solve mental health issues. Like, you have to go to a therapist. So yeah, that's the first aspect of it. The second aspect of it is something I learned from Julie, who was with me on a podcast, and we were talking about women and diabetes and all of that. And she told me, like, one tip I would give to women is to educate their partners on what kind of help they want to receive. They do not know. Tell them, not just your partners, your parents, your friends. Tell them how you'd like them to take care of you, because sometimes they really don't. They want to take care of you the best way they can, but they don't. They don't know what's your love language, how you like to be taken care of. So just be vocal about your needs. Don't expect people to know. And like for me, I expected people to know that. And I didn't say what I needed. I was angry, like, why aren't you giving me what I need? And the truth is they just didn't give me what I wanted. So that is, like, these are the two things I think that I can come out of my experience with.
Yeah. I think those are great pieces of advice for partners, even if you're not planning on having a family anytime soon. I think, creating that space for that communication, telling your partner how you want to be loved, how you want to be supported, are things that everybody could do well to understand and to understand each other a little bit better. I also want to, you're right, I am a man, I don't understand these. I'm not a father yet. I hope to be someday. But something, the discussion of miscarriage was introduced to me pretty early on, because my mom and dad, before I was born, had a miscarriage. And my mom's been really, shout out Anita. She's evolved with the times, because that used to not be something that people shared very openly. And I think there was a lot of shame and stigma around, and I think there still is. But it all makes sense, because it's grief and loss, and it's uncomfortable and it hurts. But there is really something to sharing your story and to normalizing that, even in the United States, 10 to 20% of pregnancies end in miscarriage. And so while that, doesn't necessarily ease the pain in the short term, I think in the long term, as we seek out those connections like you two have found in Positive on Glucose, and many others have found, like sharing and being open and normalizing that conversation and taking away that stigma, I think is where, the power to grow and to, I think of like a forest fire, right? Like it's so tragic when we see the flames burn down, but the richness of the soil, can allow new things to grow. And I think that to me is something that, when the fires of life come to you and they really hurt you and they cause you pain, sharing that with someone can really help, grow and enrich your soil. So I think, surrounding yourself with support and with friends and with people who really care about you and want to support you and love you in the way that you say that you want to be supported and loved, are really valuable. And so I think, as we kind of close the episode, I think that's something that I'm grateful for that this podcast has done, which is bring more people into these situations where we can have open discussions and connect with each other over really tragic situations that we're able to look back on fondly and say, because this happened to me, I can be a voice for other people and share my story in hopes that somebody out there who is struggling, advocating for themselves in these types of situations will, maybe hear something today that allows them to have the courage to make difficult or challenging decisions.
And while this episode was difficult to record, I would like for the audience to take away a feeling that this isn't a bummer. Like, it's not like sad, sad, cry, cry. It's more like Rob said, it's the fires of life that kind of shape you and shape us as people. And I think it's important for us to walk away from this today saying, like, yes, this was a hard experience that Cyrine and Eritrea went through, but that's how you learn, that's how you grow, and that's what shapes you. And I also think it's just important for us to normalize the loss of pregnancies, and that it's okay if you tried to have a baby and you didn't get to. And if you don't want to have one, that's also okay. I think it's important to normalize women everywhere in whatever decision that they decide to make with their own reproductive health. Too many times there is judgment and stigma and shame and even unnecessary conversation that, quite frankly, is not anyone's business.
I think
stop asking women when they're going to have a baby. Like, please stop doing that. Stop asking people when they're going to try again. You know, like small things that I think we forget because having a healthy baby seems so normal and so easy. We forget that it is actually a miracle of the universe.
It really is. And besides that, it's major surgery and a major physical commitment. And I think, you know, in the US, we have a lot of decisions that are being made about women's rights that are being made by men who don't understand and who aren't interested in really understanding. And so I think that's something that also, you know, making sure that women have autonomy in these decisions as well is extremely important. And I also would say, like, you know, from this Women's Health series, I have learned a lot, especially, you know, even outside of diabetes, because diabetes, as Cyrine said earlier, looks very different for everyone, but looks extremely different between men and women. There's just way fewer things that the men with diabetes have to balance in our heads. So, Cyrine, thank you for your time and for sharing your story. You know, it really has touched us, and I know our listeners are going to get a lot out of it. And thank you for your work with Positive on Glucose. You know, we don't have to look any further than Eritrea today to show the impact that it's had globally. So thank you for all that you do, and so happy to have you back on the podcast.
Same here, same here. I'm so happy to be back. And I just want to like tell people one final message. Pregnancy is hard, but like taking care of a baby is even harder. It's like it's a decision that you should not take lightly, especially if you have diabetes. Like you're running around a little monster who's like half drunk, tearing your apartment apart, and like you have to manage your highs and lows. So like just be very ready for it. And I hope it's helped so many people heal if they needed to heal from something. And I want to remind them again that they are a home. You are a home, no matter what NCD you live with. So always remember that.
I love that. This episode was produced by Eritrea Musa. It was edited and published by Ashley Bright. And our amazing video clips come from Exhale Creative, from DJ and Corey. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.